Welcome to my Epic English channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. I still remember the exact moment when my world shattered. My wife Claire and I were married for 12 years, and despite our ups and downs, I'd always believed we were solid. But as it turned out, there was a hidden dark side to my so-called happy marriage. It all started innocently enough. I was cleaning out the garage one Saturday morning when I stumbled across a dusty old suitcase of hers tucked behind some boxes. My initial thought was that it was filled with mementos from her work trips. I thought it might be fun to take a quick peek to see what memories she'd brought home over the years. But as I dug through the contents, I felt a growing sense of unease. There were souvenirs from cities I didn't remember her mentioning, and small trinkets that felt off. Curiosity turned to suspicion, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. That night when she was asleep, I did what I thought I'd never do. I checked her phone. The messages revealed a relationship with a man I had never heard of, and the more I read, the more my heart sank. For months, maybe even years, she'd been involved with him. The signs were there all along, yet I had blinded myself to them, convincing myself that she was simply busy with work. Stressed, tired, the discovery devastated me, but I was determined not to let it end there. She had destroyed my trust and had turned our marriage into a joke, so I decided to make sure she would understand the full weight of her betrayal. After weeks of planning, I confronted her in a calm, collected manner. I made sure she thought I was broken and willing to forgive, giving her the sense that she'd won and escaped the consequences. Then, without her knowing, I reached out to a lawyer and prepared for the divorce. I moved our finances into account she couldn't access, protected my assets, and made arrangements to make her transition out of my life as swift and clean as possible. The day she came back home after another work trip was the day everything fell into place. She found me packing her things, and when she tried to argue, I calmly handed her the divorce papers, laid out every single lie I'd uncovered, and told her there was nothing left to discuss. The look of shock and horror on her face as she realized I'd outplayed her. It was worth every sleepless night, every moment of heartache. In the end, I regained control of my life and peace of mind. I knew it would take time to heal, but knowing I had taken my life back on my terms was the best revenge I could have asked for. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Every time I looked at Claire, it was like a war raging inside me. Part of me wanted to confront her, let her know I was onto her, to break her facade. But the other part, the part that had been simmering in anger and hurt, knew that patience was my ally. I would wait, play my cards carefully, and then pull the rug out from under her when she least expected it. I moved through my days in a careful balancing act. My lawyer assured me that every financial measure was in place. The joint account we shared still looked the same on paper, but every asset that mattered had been transferred to secure accounts. Even the house would soon be under my name alone, a detail Claire was too distracted to notice. She was too busy planning work trips and sneaking messages on her phone. It wasn't long before I started gathering other forms of evidence. At first it was almost surreal, like something out of a bad movie. I found myself taking screenshots of her phone when she left it unattended, cataloging each one in a private folder I'd created. I bought a small recording device and started keeping it on me, just in case I caught her saying something incriminating. With each piece of evidence I collected, my resolve grew stronger. This wasn't just about ending our marriage. It was about reclaiming the life I thought we were building together. Then one evening I came across a message on her phone that almost broke my composure. I'd seen her slip into the kitchen to check a text, her face lighting up in a way it hadn't. In months she thought she was being discreet, but I saw her excitement the way she bit her lip, her fingers tapping quickly. As she replied, when she left her phone on the counter and went to the bathroom, I knew I couldn't resist looking. The message was from him, a man I now knew as Jeremy. He was suggesting a weekend getaway, something about a cabin by a lake. She'd replied with a heart emoji and a promise to work something out. It was as though every loving word she'd ever spoken to me had been rewritten in his name. And for a brief, dizzying moment, I felt my heart break all over again. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. It wasn't just anger that surged through me. It was hurt, betrayal, humiliation. I knew I needed to keep my emotions in check, to keep acting as if everything was fine. So I swallowed the bitterness, placed her phone back exactly as I'd found it, and acted as though nothing had happened. The next morning I woke up before Claire and made coffee as usual, watching her carefully as she joined me in the kitchen. She seemed almost relaxed, more so than she had in weeks. She hummed the tune softly as she poured her coffee, and when she turned to face me, her eyes familiar, light as if nothing in the world could disturb her peace. "Good morning," I replied, keeping my voice, even my face, carefully neutral. "Big day at work, just the usual," she replied, taking a sip of her coffee. "Lots of meetings." "It's nonstop." "Lately?" I nodded, biting back the retort that sat on the tip of my tongue. Meetings indeed. I forced myself to stay calm, playing the supportive husband. She believed I still was. It took everything in me not to let my mask slip, but I held firm. After all, this charade wouldn't last much longer. The following weeks became a painful waiting game. Claire and I went through the motions, our lives like clockwork. She'd leave for work with a quick peck on the cheek, return home late with flimsy excuses, and check her phone at every opportunity. But each day I collected more evidence, every message and every inconsistency feeding the fire inside me. I had enough proof to confront her now, but it felt too soon. I wanted to make sure that when I finally did, there would be no possible way for her to talk her way out of it. And then one Friday evening, an opportunity fell right into my lap. Claire came home looking unusually pleased with herself. She was glowing the way she did when she was on the verge of sharing good news. I half expected her to tell me about a promotion or something, but instead she surprised me with something else entirely. "Hey," she said, hanging up her coat. "You remember my college friend Lisa?" I nodded, vaguely recalling the name from years ago. "Yeah, why she invited me to spend the weekend with her upstate." Claire said, a hopeful smile on her face. "It'll be good to catch up, we haven't had a girls' weekend in forever." Her words hung in the air, as transparent as glass. I knew exactly what she was doing, and I could feel my stomach twist with anger. But I kept my face neutral, pretending to mull it over. "Well, if it'll be good for you," I said, finally forcing a smile. "You should go." Her face lit up, and I had to look away, disgusted by her excitement. She wrapped her arms around me in a quick hug, whispering a thank you before rushing off to pack. I watched her, unable to suppress the bitter satisfaction rising inside me. This was it. She was giving me the perfect setup for the grand finale. As she packed her bags, I excused myself, saying I had a work call to take. In reality, I was on the phone with my lawyer, finalizing the next steps. When Claire left that evening, I saw her off with a wave and a smile, silently counting down the hours until she returned to the ruins of the life she'd taken for granted. The weekend dragged on, but I kept myself busy. I moved through the house, taking inventory of what I wanted to keep and what I was ready to let go. I was calm, focused and resolute, knowing that every detail was falling into place. By the time Sunday evening rolled around, I was prepared. Claire came home late that night looking more than a little disheveled, but she masked it with a quick, casual smile. She gave me a light kiss on the cheek, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder as she told me all about her weekend with Lisa. I listened, nodding, offering a few words here and there, playing the role she expected, but inside I was counting down the minutes, savoring each one, knowing that the end was close. When she finished her story, she glanced at her phone one last time before heading upstairs, saying she was exhausted and ready for bed. I watched her go, the realization of what I was about to do settling over me like a wave of calm. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I followed her upstairs, pausing just outside our bedroom door. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and then I walked in, closing the door quietly behind me. The time for pretending was over. Tomorrow Claire would wake up to a very different world, one where the lies she'd woven so carefully would unravel in an instant, and I would be there to watch it all unfold. The night felt like a long, tense calm before a storm. I lay beside Claire, watching the rise and fall of her breathing as she slept peacefully, blissfully unaware of what awaited her. I hadn't slept, my mind too busy, replaying every detail I'd rehearsed. I'd thought about every possible reaction she might have, every excuse, every lie, every attempt she might make to save herself, and I was ready for them all. When the sun finally crept through the blinds, I rose quietly, leaving her to sleep a while longer. I went downstairs and made coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen. I glanced around, mentally bracing myself for the day ahead. This kitchen had once felt like the heart of our home, a place where we'd shared countless mornings, countless laughs, but today it felt like a set stage ready for the final act. I waited, sipping my coffee, slowly running through everything one last time. Around 7:30, I heard her footsteps on the stairs, and soon enough Claire walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, her hair slightly mused. She smiled when she saw me, her usual bright morning smile, and my stomach twisted at the sight. "Morning," she said, heading for the coffee pot. "You're up early," I shrugged. Keeping my expression neutral, couldn't sleep. She poured herself a cup, and I watched her as she took that first sip, a small sigh of contentment escaping her. It was almost surreal, the casual intimacy of the moment, as if everything were normal, but nothing was normal anymore. "Did you have a good time with Lisa?" I asked, my voice light casual. She looked up, nodding as she leaned against the counter. "Yeah, it was great. Just what I needed." We laughed, drank a little too much wine, talked about old times. It was nice to catch up. I nodded slowly, the faintest hint of a smile playing on my lips. "That's good. I'm glad you had a good time." We fell into silence, the weight of it building slowly. As I watched her, she shifted uncomfortably, perhaps sensing that something was different, though she couldn't yet place what. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. I set my coffee mug down, looking her squarely in the eyes. "Claire," I said, my tone steady, "we need." Confusion and then something else, fear, maybe flashing across her face. "Sure, what about?" I took a deep breath, feeling the anger simmering beneath my calm exterior. "About Jeremy." The color drained from her face, her grip tightening around the coffee cup until her knuckles turned white. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out for the first time in months. I saw her carefully crafted facade crack. I don't know what you're talking about." She stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "Don't insult me by pretending you don't know I've known about him for months. Claire, about the messages, the secret trips, the nights you spent with him instead of me." "I know everything." She stared at me, her eyes wide with shock and panic. I could see her mind racing, searching for some way to explain herself, to talk her way out of it. But there was no way out. Not this time. How did you find out?" she asked, her voice small, defeated. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "It doesn't matter how I found out. What matters is that you did this. You threw away everything we had, every moment we spent together, every promise we made. You chose him over me, and for what, some cheap thrill, a little excitement, was it worth it?" "Claire," her eyes filled with tears, and she looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I never meant for this to happen." She whispered. Justin, don't know. I felt lonely and he was there and it just happened." I clenched my jaw, my hands balling into fists as I struggled to keep my anger in check. "It just happened." I repeated, my voice dripping with disdain. "That's your excuse. You felt lonely, so you decided to betray me, to lie to me, to turn our marriage into a joke." She flinched at my words, her shoulders slumping as the weight of her actions settled over her. "I know I messed up," she murmured, her voice choked with tears. "I know I hurt you and I hate myself for it. But please, we can work through this. We can go to counseling, try to fix things. I don't want to lose you." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I almost felt a flicker of pity, almost. But then I remembered everything I'd been through, the months of lies, the nights I'd spent agonizing over her betrayal, and I knew that pity had no place here. "There's nothing left to fix, Claire," I said coldly. "Our marriage ended the moment you decided to cheat. I won't pretend that we can go back to the way things were, because that would be a lie, and I've had enough of those to last a lifetime." Her face crumpled and she sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. As she sobbed, I watched her, feeling an odd sense of detachment, as if I were watching a stranger's life fall apart. In a way. I suppose I was the woman sitting before me wasn't the woman I'd married. She was a stranger who had taken everything I'd held dear and torn it apart. I stood there letting her cry, letting her feel the full weight of what she'd done. When she finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen, she took a shaky breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "So what now?" she asked, her tone broken. I pulled a small stack of papers from the drawer, setting them on the table in front of her. "Those are the divorce papers," I said, my voice as cold and steady as I could manage. "I've had everything arranged, the assets, the house, the accounts, it's all taken care of. You'll get a fair settlement, but I want you out of here." By the end of the week, she stared at the papers, her hands trembling. As she reached for them, she flipped through the pages, her expression growing more devastated with each one. You really planned all of this?" "Yes," I replied, my tone unyielding. "While you were busy with your lies, I was busy protecting myself. I knew you'd try to weasel your way out of this, to play the victim, to beg for a second chance. But I'm done. I won't give you the satisfaction of thinking you can manipulate your way out of this." Her eyes met mine, a glimmer of something like resentment flickering behind her tears. "So that's it? Then you're just throwing me away?" I felt a surge of anger rise within me, and I leaned in, my voice low and deadly. "I'm not the one who threw anything away. Claire, you did that all on your own. You chose him over and over again. even when you could have stopped, even when you knew it would destroy us. So don't you dare try to turn this around on me." She looked down her face, etched with shame and regret, but I didn't care anymore. I had no sympathy left to give her, no forgiveness left to offer. I turned away, leaving her there with the papers, her guilt, and the wreckage of the life she'd built on lies. I walked out of the kitchen, letting the silence fill the space where our marriage had once been. The house was quiet after that. Claire didn't come downstairs for hours, leaving me alone in the echoing stillness of what used to be our home. I didn't know what she was doing, but I didn't much care. I had said everything I needed to say. There was nothing left to add, no words that could change what had been done. I'd made myself a plan for the day, trying to avoid sitting in the heaviness of it all. I went to the office thinking that maybe work would keep my mind off things, but it was impossible to focus the looks on my colleagues. Faces blurred as they walked past me, each offering an understanding smile or a gentle pat on the shoulder. Apparently my silence had spoken louder than words they could tell. Something was wrong. By midday I couldn't take it anymore. The weight in my chest was suffocating, and it was impossible to keep pretending. Everything was fine. I left early heading home, unsure if Claire would even be there. When I opened the front door, the first thing that struck me was the smell. Her perfume lingered faintly in the air, a ghostly reminder of all the moments that were now gone. I walked through the rooms, taking in the sight of the life we'd built together. The family photos still hung on the walls, snapshots of happier times now twisted with the bitter knowledge of what lay behind them. I wandered aimlessly from room to room, unsure of what I was looking for, until I reached our bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and for a moment I hesitated. A strange feeling washed over me, a mix of dread and resignation. I pushed the door open, stepping inside my eyes, scanning the room. That's when I noticed the folded piece of paper on the bed, resting beside her wedding ring. My heart sank as I walked over, picking up the note with a shaking hand. Her handwriting was familiar, every loop and curve, a reminder of the woman I thought I'd known. I unfolded the paper, reading her words slowly, each one sinking deeper into me. I'm sorry for everything. I can't undo the hurt I've caused, and I don't know how to live with the regret. You were everything I ever wanted, and I destroyed it. I wish I could explain why, but even I don't fully understand. All I know is that I love you and that I failed you. I don't expect forgiveness and I don't deserve it. I'll be gone by the time you read this. I hope you find peace, even if I never will. The last line blurred as tears filled my eyes, blurring the words on the page. She was gone. She'd packed her things, left her ring, and walked out of my life for good. I hadn't thought it would hurt this much. I thought the anger would protect me, that the betrayal would numb the pain. But standing there in our empty bedroom, I felt a hollow ache settle into my chest, a deep, cutting emptiness that nothing could fill. I sank onto the bed, clutching the note, feeling the silence close in around me. All the things I'd planned to say, the revenge I'd carefully orchestrated, none of it mattered anymore. There was no satisfaction in this, no sense of victory, just a bitter, aching loss that felt like it would never end. The house felt different now, colder, emptier. Every room seemed to echo with the memories we'd shared, each one now tainted by the knowledge of what we'd lost. I thought back to all the nights we'd spent together, the laughter, the quiet moments, the love that had once felt so real. And now it was all gone, slipping through my fingers like sand, leaving only emptiness behind. I stayed there in the quiet for hours, unable to move, unable to think. I thought I'd feel better once she was gone, that the anger would fade, leaving only a sense of peace. But there was no peace here, no relief, only the knowledge that I was alone, and that the life we'd built was nothing more than a shattered illusion. By the time I finally stood up, it was dark outside. I made my way through the house, locking the doors, turning off the lights, moving on autopilot, as if going through the motions of a life that no longer felt like my own. I went to bed lying in the darkness, the silence pressing down on me, filling every corner of the room, and as I eyed the ceiling I felt a single tear. In the end there was no revenge, no justice, no closure. Only the quiet, empty sadness of a life left in ruins,